All right. I'm going to give everybody just a second to get logged in. But this is extremely exciting, and we are so excited to have you with us today, Florence. For those of you guys who do not know, my name is Ginger. I'm the Executive Director of the Connectionology Seminars of America. We are so glad to have you with us today. We've got a wonderful webinar for you on brain injury. And if you guys have questions, we want you to ask them throughout the webinar. I'm going to kind of keep an eye out on the Q&A box as well as the chat. And then later on in this webinar, you're going to meet 3 of our incredible partners over at HMR, OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting, as well as Fox-AE. Amazing companies. So you guys are going to want to definitely watch them and jot down their information. But let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot of great things that we're going to talk about today. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our wonderful speaker, Miss Florence Murray, who is a partner with a 92-year-old firm of Murray & Murray in Sandusky, Ohio. And I honestly just saw her view out the other side of the window, you guys. It is absolutely gorgeous. Her practice centers on traumatic brain injuries and deaths, and whether they are from trucking collisions or boating accidents, railroad injuries, or civil rights violations. She also holds a BA degree from the St. I hope I'm saying this correctly, Florence. Is it Ignatius? Ignatius of Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland, as well as an MED degree from the Ashland University in Ashland, Ohio, and an MBA from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. And that also includes a JD degree from the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. She's also a National Board of Trial Advocacy, which is the NBTA, as well as certified civil trial lawyer, and a member of the American Board of Trial Advocates, which a lot of you guys know as ABOTA. She's a board member of the Ohio Association of Justice. She's a board member of the American Association for Justice as well. And she also sits on the board of the Traumatic Brain Injury Litigation Group with AAJ. And in addition to that, she's also a fellow of the Pound Civil Justice Institute, as well as a lifetime member of the NAACP. And in her non-legal life, she also assists with the Habitat for Humanity, and she sits on as a board member on the county's court-appointed special advocates, basically it's called CASA, for children. And she enjoys spending time playing tennis, playing golf, and skiing with her 2 sons who attend the rivals of the Ohio State University, as well as the University of Michigan. So Florence, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, and we're very excited to hear what you're going to teach us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I apologize for just a second there. The audio might have cut out. So if you can't hear me at any point, please let me know if something happens with my connectivity, in which case I apologize in advance. As Ginger just said, I try to focus on brain injuries, and I started doing that a few years back because I realized so many people coming into our firm were having brain injury symptoms and were not getting diagnosed. And being out in a rural area, that's one of the things that we know is not uncommon, is that individuals aren't getting the treatment because we don't have level 1 trauma centers. And so it makes it all the more important that lawyers can recognize some of these symptoms and help with the families get to the right care, which is always my goal. So feel free to ask questions as we go, but also you can email me with anything follow up. I did give the slides to Ginger, and I'm going to talk about a questionnaire later, and I provided that as well, so that'll be available to you. Let's see. So I just did this presentation for some of you who are AAJ. I did part of this presentation there, and I'm sort of expanding on what I did there. But for purposes of doing this, I called this the invisible injury, which is not unusual to hear about brain injuries. And so going through this, there's going to be a number of things that I want to talk about. And these are just sort of what we're going to touch on. We're going to hit some more other than just this, but it's really about teaching the family on using both the diary, but also helping us to understand who's injured how they're injured and how do we prove it and what witnesses do we want to use to prove it. And that will vary depending on your clients, but the whole purpose of this is to then obviously prove up our damages, whether it's for a jury or whether it's for the family and the doctors and the treating physicians. So one of the first things I do when I take on these cases is I will get a journal, and I keep a bunch of them in my drawer. Some of them have lines on them, some of them are blank pages, and they're different sizes. I have them small enough to make it put in their pocket. I have them larger too, and I let the individuals pick. Sometimes both the brain damage survivor, that would be, the person who's been injured in one of those events that Ginger talked about that I do, as well as somebody from their family who's with me might also take a journal. So I pick them up wherever I go, and I found it's sort of telling even where you start that process as to what they select, whether they pick a journal with a plain cover, whether they pick something that they can carry around in their pocket, or they want something bigger that it has more substance to them, whether they want something with a design on the front. It really, it's helpful to have something that's more personal to them. And then the next piece of this is making sure that you provide the resources, and I hope this is, yeah, okay. So some of the resources that I like to have available are these pamphlets, and well, maybe when we do an announcement for one of the sponsors, I can grab a couple of them to show them to you. But I purchased these from the Brain Injury Association of America, who has a lot of great materials on their website. And these resources, there's also the smaller ones that talk about driving with a brain injury. And there's ones about returning to work or what to expect when the person comes home. All sorts of things that are geared either for the survivor or for the loved ones. And my clients love them. I just let them keep them, right? I've bought some books that have been recommended on different listservs that are recommended for brain injured families, and I've given them books. Sometimes they come back and sometimes they don't, but I figure if that helps one more person to better understand how to look at the person in front of them, or how to help better relate to this new person, this different person, then it's money well spent. And so these resources then that I provide, it's just the beginning part. And the part of having this conversation is having the language. These tools that I use help provide the language, so that way when I'm talking to somebody, I can understand what is going on in their life, and I can help them to understand why this person's different, and then who to get them to. Because again, we're talking about people who oftentimes walk into our offices or talk to us on the phone, and we discover that maybe they had a diagnosis with a concussion at the hospital, but then they'll say the glaucoma scale was a 15. So, the person didn't remember losing any consciousness, which that is the biggest pet peeve I have about the medical system, is that they're not trained to ask the question that helps the injured person understand whether or not they may have lost consciousness. Because for obvious reasons, if you are unconscious, there's a good chance that you're not going to recall being unconscious, because by definition, you're not present for that event. And so the only way then to really understand if somebody lost consciousness is to have that conversation about, what do you remember? And then what happened next? And what do you remember after that? And then trying to figure out if they had any moments where they suddenly like came to, or they realized, they had a change and they remember driving, and then all of a sudden they remember like being stopped, or they remember anticipating that they were going to be hit, and they don't remember the moment of impact, but then they can remember sort of something after it that's maybe it's only seconds later. Sometimes it's that short, but that is a loss of consciousness, and they don't know how long it lasts, because unless there's a passenger in the car who didn't lose consciousness and who didn't have their lights knocked out, then they're not going to have a witness to the fact that they lost some period of time. And so having that conversation then is important to help them begin this process of how do we get the right care. And was this simply an event that is over with, and maybe you're looking at PTSD that isn't brain injury related, because maybe they can remember the traumatic events, but they have some issues with how things went. Maybe they have the order wrong, or maybe they can't remember the day at all, but they don't have evidence of a brain injury. So we have to sort of help sift through it, and then get them to the right person who can help diagnose or figure out who else could diagnose. And so it's often times not going to be your family doctors, because they are looking for the obvious kind of injuries. And in Ohio, I've been to conferences where the doctors have not testified. The doctors have provided education where they've said that even the trauma doctors are not being trained to look for any brain damage that is not bleeding or a sudden emergent event that requires their intervention. Otherwise, the whole idea is to figure out who needs the care now, and then who can be put into a later funnel for seeing an expert or their family doctor in a week. And as you can imagine, a week is a long time to go if you are dealing with a brain injury. And then telling them to follow up with a doctor, and sometimes they'll say the discharge paperwork, they follow up with a neurologist in a week, and they don't give them any names. And most of our clients don't know the difference between a neurologist and a family doctor. And so they might follow up with family doctor, and when they go into the family doctor, maybe the thing that bothers them the most is their neck or a shoulder, or like their hips, or something that is they think the family doctor can treat them for, and they're not thinking of the fact that they can't sleep. They're not thinking of the fact that they're irritable all the time. They're not thinking of the fact that they don't remember some of the events of the crash, or that they're leaving the refrigerator open or the grill on. They're not thinking of those things, because the doctor's the one cueing in to ask questions, and they ask questions based upon what is most troublesome to the person when they appear at the office. So that's why family doctors, to me, are not the right individuals to help our clients. So we have to understand what's going on to be able to figure out if, in fact, we're looking at a brain injury. There are also resources that are available to the brain injured survivor, and here's an example of one. In Ohio, the Ohio State University actually has a brain injury center, and they put on wonderful programs. I mean, just amazing programs for families, for loved ones, for the injured. And for instance, this flyer talks about the fact that they have it every Wednesday. They have something called Neuro Nights, and you can actually register for it yourself. I get them on their list, so I get their PowerPoint presentations, and doctors and the experts we use are putting materials out there, and they're speaking before injured individuals and their loved ones, and they provide these wonderful resources that you can use in your own cases. and that we can direct our clients to. So I sign up for it and I get the materials, but I also then try to encourage my clients to listen in on this or participate in this, depending on how open they are at different points in our relationship to doing these things. And so this was an example of, obviously it ended, this session ended in May, but they're constantly putting these out. And so what they do is the first week, it's a learning week. And then the next week is applying something that has been learned in the process. And then the last one is sharing. And that's for the injured folks or their loved ones to be able to share stories about what's happened to them. So this is an example of something that's available. Another one that I have a link for, I think later, is Pink Concussions. You may have heard of. She had put together a YouTube channel. It's by a woman who suffered her own brain injury and then started this series where she interviews different providers and healthcare providers and people who can help them, them being a person with a brain injury or brain damage, and then their support folks, their family, their loved ones, understand what they're looking at and how to best help them. So she also has a YouTube channel, and she does interviews on a lot of Thursdays during the daytime with different people in the field to try and shed some more light on those of us working with and those other folks living with people who have survived a brain injury or brain damage. Okay, so then let's see, do you see it? Okay, so the diary, the purpose of the journal is really to, it provides, so part of it is to open the conversation. I mean, that's a big piece of it, is to get our clients talking about their symptoms, about their day, about writing something down when they notice something. And it may be something that's simple, that doesn't seem like it's that important, but when you see it happen repeatedly, or they see it one way and a loved one says, well, that's not quite what is happening, and can shed some more light on the other aspect of it that the brain injured, brain damaged survivor can't perceive. And part of this then is interviewing the client to help them to understand. And I think, let's see, I want to pull up this worksheet. This is the, let's see, you can't see that, so I have to change this. Okay, so hopefully you see this checklist in front of you. I cannot tell if you can.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Okay, so, and I apologize to whomever, wherever I got this. Now, I can't remember if this was in one of my brain injury magazines, so I subscribe to those different organizations. Like, I have one, I think you can see the Brain Injury Challenge. I can see it's backwards, but this is from the Brain Injury Association of America and their articles and other things that can help. So I may have gotten the checklist from there. If I got it off a listserv and you're the generator of this information, I apologize. There's nothing on the document that helped me to remember how I came about it, but I use it regularly. And I was asked this question recently, do I have a concern about using it and having them share it with doctors? I do take this off when it is a case where they're so lost in how they're getting care and how their recovery is going, that this is going to be very helpful for them to be able to take to a doctor. And in that case, I get rid of some of this and I just make it about their opportunity to go through and figure out what's happening and how often are these things happening. So, and I have had some where we filled it, I don't fill it out. So that way we don't have this problem with me saying, them going into doctor and saying, my lawyer helped me fill this out. I give this to them. And while they're in my office and they're, somebody's with them, and whether it's a child, whether it's a parent, whether it's their significant other, and work through this together. And then I make a copy of it so that I have it, but let them keep their original that they've written on and be able to add to it as they go along, or be able to finish it. Like it's too long, and we're going to get into that in a minute too, but it's too long for them to fill out at one sitting. And for them to read it is often impossible as well. And I'm going to talk about that shortly too, as to what causes that. But one of the areas that nobody asks them about, so you've got this orientation and attention. These things are things that if somebody comes to a brain injury with a learning disability, say, these are going to be much worse. And they have different things that will affect how bad this is, depending on what they come to the table with. And so this starting, changing, and maintaining activities, that's something nobody asks about. Doctors, neurologists aren't asking about those things, but they may be something that sheds a great light into your particular client. The ones that do come up are, of course, this retaining information. I mean, that's the elephant in the room that we talk about the most. And then included in this are things like slurred speech, or not being able to remember a word, or the things that we experience, a lot of us experience, I shouldn't say we, maybe you don't, but where you walk into a room and you can't remember why you're there. So, I mean, we have strategies like that's been a challenge for a lot of people I've talked to, and not just those with brain injuries. And so they go back to where they were when they had the thought, and then they can remember why they went to the room, and then they go back in the room. But for somebody who has a brain injury, they may not have any ability to cue back to something else that will trigger why they want to do something. And so they're relying more on individuals around them to help them. And so those are things that doctors often will ask about. And it's only really successful for neurologists and other treating doctors to be able to ask about these if they have a loved one present. And so if you haven't dealt much with brain injured clients, one of the best things you can do is to make sure they have somebody to go with them. And if I have somebody who has nobody to go with them, then I hire a nurse as a case manager to be the person to go with them to help advocate, because these clients need an advocate. They won't remember the things that they went in to say. Even if they write it down, they're not going to remember when they get into the appointment either to bring the thing they wrote it down on or to go over the thing they wrote it down on, because the doctor starts talking about something and they end up down one path and they've already forgotten that they had a list of things that were problems for them. So I have hired nurses to go with my clients, act as their case manager, and make sure that they know when their next appointment is, that they know what medications to get the medication picked up, that they know if there was a referral, how to get to that appointment, how to find out who that doctor is or where that doctor is. Transportation sometimes is an issue for some of my clients. This language comprehension is another great one. You already saw that there's some overlap in that category we just saw, like this slurring words. But it's other things like they can't, when you ask somebody to do something who has a brain injury or brain damage, you have to break it down for them. They can't remember multiple steps to do something. You can only give them one thing to do at a time. it's important to write the things down for them to do, because they can only remember one thing at a time. Visual processing can be a problem, and that will show up not only in the fact that their brain's not necessarily seeing everything in front of them the way it should yet, but it can also be because they have vestibular disturbance, which is can cause double vision. And so for that treatment, you have to go to an ophthalmologist or an optometrist who can help them to figure out if prisms are going to help bring their vision back. So what can happen in a brain injury is that it can be this way or it can be this way, but that the vision they're seeing and can be off. So that way they can't read things. And so they can't take the visual cues from anything because everything's off. And so it makes all of their other symptoms worse. It makes their irritation worse. It makes their sleep worse. As you can imagine, it can cause things related to dizziness, things related to not only your ability to read, but your ability to drive. And for some people, there's a relatively easy fix. They can put prisms in their, either give them glasses that have prisms, or if they have a prescription already, add a prism to the prescription, and it brings their visual focus back in alignment. And that can make a huge difference for somebody who's having nausea issues or is running into things. And that can affect then these visual motor cues. This is the double vision. But they can have difficulty seeing things all of a sudden where they didn't before it. They didn't need glasses, and suddenly they're having trouble actually getting anything off of, like if they were looking at a TV or trying to read a book. And then, so this questionnaire, as you can see, it goes on 10 pages. Some of the problem solving is another category that I see a lot of issues with. And this category on organization and planning skills, I mean, you could sort of forget that if you're in the early stages of a brain injury. The impulse control is something that I see later, that because what happens with the loved ones, and so this is a checklist that's important to revisit, and then to visit separately with a loved one or a significant other or somebody who spends a lot of time around them, who can point out things that they're seeing, like that the person is unable to wait to be able to get their words out, that they are repeating things that they already said, that they have no ability to really focus on the other person's conversation, that they're lost in their own words that they're trying to get out, which is really irritating to the people around them. It looks like all they're being is rude. And what you'll find too is that other things will happen where they start withdrawing then, and they don't want to engage in conversation because they can't follow the conversation. And so if there's a group where there's more people, more than just their usual one or two loved ones or family members or friends, if there's conversations going, they can't be that close to it and they can't focus on it, and it can be too loud. And so there's all sorts of nonverbal cues that are going to come up in the course of their interactions with others. So there's other things that relate to social adjustment. And these things, as you can see, would go hand in hand. So looking like your bossy can go hand in hand with not being able to hear properly, or not being able to remember what you need to say, so you know you've got to get it out. Or maybe you have problems with controlling your impulses, and so because of that, it looks like you're bossy because you got to be the first one to say something, and sometimes the last one to say something, because you've got this pervasive thought that you can't get rid of this thing that you wanted to tell somebody, and then you forget that you already told them. Or suddenly the person goes from being the happiest person in the room, who could light up a room with their smile to not even being able to understand another person's sense of humor. Everything falls flat. And I, for instance, have a client right now who's having this issue with blackout spells. We still don't have the source of what's causing the blackout spells, but it wouldn't be until you start having the conversation, and this one came up in having the conversation with her about a loss of consciousness at the time of the crash and trying to understand if there were events that she couldn't recall. And in the course of having that conversation, she said how she does crosswords and Sudoku, and she was working on them, and she would all of a sudden realize that the book had fallen on the floor. She was sitting in a chair and sits in a regular spot to do this, and would drop things and then would come to. Or one time she was walking with her granddaughter down the sidewalk, and she suddenly blanked out, and she didn't fall. The episode was that short that she didn't fall, but it was enough that she lost vision and then came back to. We're still working on trying to understand what's causing it. They are not seizures, by the way, but it's not until you have these conversations that you can understand what it is that they're having difficulties with, so that even if you can't find a treating physician, you can get them to an expert. So I'm fortunate. I live an hour and a half from Dr. Randall Benson up in Michigan. He's fantastic. And from the endocrinologist up there that is crackerjack smart, that's L.P.A. Azahali. And I'm so lucky to be able to send my clients up there when I can't get them to a treating doctor, because we have the Cleveland Clinic where the doctors will not testify and will not give you causation. And so how much they're going to help the client depends on getting them to the right doctor. But then you still have the issue of you can't communicate with that doctor about the things that you know, and you want to make sure that all of that is incorporated into what the expert has to understand and talk about and testify about regarding your injured individual, as well as to get them the help that they need so that they can get on the best path to recovery. The emotional adjustment is a huge thing. And on here, you'll see it says the making inappropriate sexual comments. The one that I find more often than not is that when you go further down, the loss of interest in sexual intimacy and the inability to actually engage in the sexual intimacy. I have clients who, they've never had anybody ask about it, so they don't talk about it. And once you understand it, it changes the dynamics in the case, because now you have a client who's been married. In one case, I had a client, they've been married almost 40 years. I think it's their 40th anniversary. And as I was shocked when they said that even at that, they're in their, just at 60, they have intercourse, they were before this crash, 2 to 3 times a week. And yet then when the crash happens, he's unable to at all. And that's not unusual. But getting them to talk about it with you makes it easier for them to then talk about it with doctors. And then when you get to a deposition, then they do a fabulous job, because they've now gotten comfortable with talking about it, with putting it out there and not being ashamed of it. In the last deposition where this came up, I was shocked. There were, I think it was 5 defense attorneys, and one of them had I don't know if it's the gall or the idiocy, but he actually did say, and I know this is open for others to be able to listen to this presentation, but actually did say, well, have you even tried? And if you can imagine what that caused in the response of my client to that questioning as to whether or not what he's testifying to under oath did in fact happen, is in fact damage in this case. They settled the case. They don't want a jury to hear them talk openly about their loss of their marital relationship and his worries about then that she's going to leave him because he can't do anything now. In his mind, he can't do anything for the benefit of their relationship, including working. Sleep disturbance, you see down here on page 8 at the bottom, sleep disturbance, memory loss, dizziness, it's all sort of thrown into this bucket. And the fatigue, those are very common and probably the things that you know about the most. But they can have other problems that we aren't thinking about. There's the photophobia, which is the sensitivity to light, and the sensitivity to sound. Those are very common. And then so then when you get down here, we've got pain. We've got other things that are important to know. I touched on seizures already, but there are other things that can be affected, such as this loss of feeling, this numbness, the loss of the use of their bowel control. Then what you do is you can compare this later, so that way, if your client, sometimes clients actually make progress, and if they're making progress and you revisit this, then you have the opportunity to sort of go over with them. You remember how before this was a frequent problem for you, but this actually improved. And that can be very helpful for the clients who can't see that they've made any progress, but you have something that you can do at different points in time if you think they are making progress to help bolster their attitude toward their recovery. Let's see, so I want to change this back. Okay,
Yeah, this is great, Florence. And if it's okay, is now okay to take just a quick break?
Absolutely.
Great, and I'll bring in 2 of our sponsors, and I see everyone's chats, the questions in there. No matter what, I'm still going to send you a copy of Florence's checklist, which is exactly the copy that you guys have been looking at. So don't worry, if you registered, you're going to get a copy of exactly what she showed, just in case. But let me take a quick moment. I'm going to bring in Cody from Fox-AE. I have been raving about this company that has been working with us recently. They are amazing. John Romano and his firm loves working with them as well. And you're going to see a little bit about what they do. And Cody, I see you're here with us right now. I don't want to share too much because I'm so fascinated by all the incredible work you do. But welcome. It's great to have you today. And tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thanks, Ginger. And in the spirit of TBI, I noticed, Florence, your first slide was proving an invisible injury. And so what we do is we're a science and engineering graphic studio. And so we make illustrations based on scientific data. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. And so that's exactly what we do. We prove invisible injuries by making them tangible. So there may be, MRIs that are just simple black and white. And then we get with your neuroradiologist or your radiologist, and we create these 3-dimensional physics and science-based animations. Some are G-force related. Some are, that was Q, contra Q, obviously. And so here we have an example of oxygen not getting to the brain because of an improper placement of a breathing tube. And so we have the ventricle and the ganglia enlarging. And so we're able to show these brain scans and over lapsed time, right? And so you can see the blood right there and the hemorrhage. Well, it turned into a grade 4 hemorrhage. and we base that and we make that tangible. So we prove invisible injuries and we illustrate the doctor's opinion. Here's a misdiagnosis. There was a brain tumor in this fellow's brain, and we took the MRIs and we constructed an actual brain tumor. But instead, the radiologist thought it was a stroke, and improperly, he was given the wrong medicine to treat a stroke, and it caused a brain bleed. And so here if I can just rewind just a little bit, but you can see this gray and white differentiation, right? As TBI cases go, and we're able to show that in color in 3D, but we're also able to show different illustrations here. The hyperdense arteries, and we show, hey, this is really how obvious it was. And so here is the change. And I've showed this graphic before, not the whole animation, but the difference between a brain stroke CT and the actual CT showing a tumor. And so the radiologist has got to know that, didn't know that. But the whole point of this is we can show your TBI with clarity so that the layperson understands. And so then we can also show the effects. Because this individual was given the wrong medicine, that is the hemorrhage. That's not an illustration of the hemorrhage. That is the hemorrhage, because we modeled that based on those scans, those MRIs. And so we're able to do that. We're able to show invisible injuries with clarity. So Florence, thank you for your presentation. And Ginger, thanks for the intro.
Yeah, this is incredible and so realistic. And we love the work that you guys do. Cody, that was cool. That was really cool to be able to see how that all was put together. Don't forget to put your information in the chat box. And I hope everybody watching will save Cody's information and reach out to him, especially if you have any questions. So it doesn't hurt to just call him. And Cody, keep up the great work, my friends.
All right. Thanks, Ginger.
Thanks for coming today. And now you guys, I'm so excited because we have Taylor with HMR, who's going to share with you guys a little bit more about what they specialize in. And again, another great company that we enjoy working with, who works with, firms all over the country. Taylor is based actually now in North Carolina. Is that right, Taylor?
That's correct.
Fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit more about what you guys specialize in.
Yeah, thank you again for the introduction, Ginger. My name's Taylor Luce with HMR Servicing. I'm sorry I don't have any animations like Cody just provided, but I just was talking to Ginger before coming on, and what Florence is talking about hits home for us, because the three products that we offer, we're a national medical funding company for underinsured or uninsured injured plaintiffs. And a lot of these, traumatic brain injuries, even if these patients or clients are insured, there is provisions in their policies that sometimes prohibit them from getting the treatment that they need to get this medical treatment taken care of. And that is where we can come in and help fund on a case-by-case basis. A lot of these same clients have lost the capacity to provide for their families, whether it's paying their car note or rent, or paying their mortgage, or just paying for routine groceries. We can also help with a pre-settlement advance on that front as well. And then, as all of you guys know, when these cases go to litigation and you're needing this accident reconstructionist or this life care plan or this expert to come testify live at trial, sometimes their invoices and retainer fees get to be outrageous. And we can also help fund those cases as well through our case cost or litigation funding program. So all three programs that we offer on a case-by-case basis, we just hope that if you have any clients experiencing, whether it's TBI or a catastrophic spinal cord injury or even an MRI, that you give us an option or an opportunity to work with you and your clients. I'll be happy to leave my information in the chat box. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak on Connectionology. They're a wonderful partner to us, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Taylor. And we appreciate everything that you guys do too. I know we're just a few months coming off of our big Nashville TBI seminar that we did, that you guys were a major part of. And we are doing it again in 2023. I believe
Round
it's
two.
like May 6th or something. You guys don't want to miss this TBI conference. I mean, go ahead, mark your calendars. You can go onto our website, connectionology.com right now, and there's some information. But we had a lot of fun in Nashville. You don't want to miss out on this. Thank you again for everything that you do, Taylor.
Yep. Thank you all. Y'all take care.
All right. And then Florence, if it's okay, I think we should be able to pick right back up where we left off. And I believe
So-
your slides will pop right back on.
I said I was going to grab these while that's why I ran away from the chair. So I have these booklets, and you can see they're little. They're perfect size for handing out. They didn't cost me much. I can't remember right now off the top of my head how much they did cost, but they're from the Brain Injury Association. This is the bigger one, which is a little bit thicker, but not, I mean, they're really helpful on helping families get through this time frame. This one is like behavioral challenges after brain injury. And so there's some that relate to falls, there's some that relate to children, as I had said, as I've shown in my earlier thing. And so I encourage you to go take a look at it, see what's out there, because it can be very helpful to opening that conversation with your clients. I put up here, let's see if you can see. Okay, you can see the right, okay.
Looks good.
So the CDC has some great information on the traumatic brain injury. Let's see. There's also the Brain Injury Association of USA, which is different. The Brain Injury Association of America and the Brain Injury Association of USA are different, but both have some really good information. And I don't think I need to, well, let's see. I'll show you one of them. And I have to, I don't know, I think I have to share the screen to see it. So this is the Brain Injury Association of America. This is a simple page, talks about functions of the brain. And this is really basic, but it's really helpful, one, for anybody who's just starting in a brain injury case, to help you sort of understand what parts of the brain are affected when you have some sort of traumatic event that causes the brain to be damaged. And for those of you who don't know, and I suspect you all do, but in case anybody out there doesn't, you do not have to hit your head on anything to have a brain injury. We know that from football players who get jostled, and of course a lot of times they are striking something, but we know it from car crashes. We can have I have lots of clients over the years who are in a car crash. There's enough speed or impact, or even if it's from the side and it's not even that fast, it causes the brain to move within the skull, and the skull is rough on the inside. It's not smooth, and the brain itself is smooth and soft, and so it tears. And it doesn't take a lot for it to tear, but it's not enough to show up on a CT scan. And the CT scan that they do right after a crash is simply to show that whether or not there's trauma that needs to escalate that level of injury, so that way they get to surgery if they need to, or they get a shunt if they need to, if there's pressure in their brain that needs to be addressed immediately. It's not for the kind of injuries that end up walking into our doors, the ones that have injury to the neurons and injury to the axonal sheaths that cover I know that term's not quite right, doesn't sound right, but that are on the outside of all these fibers that are in the brain that get torn when the brain gets bounced around in there. And the older we are, the more damage is going to occur, because when you're younger, you have more of this jello, to think of it like gelatinous fluid surrounding the brain, between the brain and the skull. And as we age, there's less of it, there's less amount to protect, and it's changes in nature. So there's just less to keep the skull from being the thing that damages the brain. And so when the brain moves around, it has less cushion to protect it from hitting the brain. And so sometimes we know, like a client may have a bruise that happens, or they may have remembered having a scar or scab or bleeding or something on some area, or they may just remember that the one side of their head hurt, and that will help guide you. Or you have a biomechanic, you can say that they were T-boned, and so the skull went both hit this side and it hit this side. So your damage may be more in the orange area on this diagram, and that will help you to sort of look for different symptoms based upon it. Or if they get hit in the front, and it's in the orange area, then you're going to be looking for something that happens at the back, such as the occipital lobe. And I saw somebody put in the chat something about the other problems that can occur. And I don't mean to say that everything that can happen to our clients is everything that I'm talking about now. But one of the other things that gets affected is their perception of sound. And I had one who, I'm trying to change my screen share. I had one client who had brain injury from a horn blast. If you can believe it, it was only it was 1 second was what we got people to agree on. And yet that was enough to cause brain injury in him. And because it was a horn blast, it was a sensorial injury of the auditory system, but it affected his central processing. And that looked just like a classic brain injury, but wasn't a classic brain injury. And that I found to be a very helpful understanding of the way in which even damage to the inner ear can result from whether it's sound or whether it's from impact. And that affects our client's ability to process and to interact with their environment, and will make them more agitated and change their personality. So some brainstorming lists. These are some examples, things to talk about, things to look for. And these are one of the most common areas that I see the changes in people, that then you can have witnesses talk about fact, witnesses explain, but these increased frustration, they get irritated at the drop of a hat, is the expression. And they didn't used to be that way. And they, like I said, when the lability is the ability to understand the emotions around them, and it causes them, and let's see if I show you this. I wanted to share one other thing with you, because it's common, and it comes up in like those neuro nights that I showed you that Ohio State puts on. These kind of issues are common and ones that they address more frequently because it affects their family life, it affects their interaction with everybody else. But this is an example of what the lability, the inability to moderate their emotions, can result in excessive crying or laughing or both, and they can go from one to the other. And so it's another type of injury that can result, that you will get from talking about these mood changes and helping to understand what everybody around them seeing and what they're seeing. You know, they may have been somebody who had a lot of friends, and now they can't even go to a restaurant because when brain injured survivors or the brain damaged, I try to use those terms interchangeably, because injuries suggest, you know, you can get over an injury. It's like using the term accident versus wreck. You know, an accident's a mistake, we want to forgive it. An injury is passing. Damage is damage. Damage is, when you talk about somebody being brain damaged, it is a lot more severe in a lot of people's perception, and therefore will help a jury to better understand, help adjusters to better understand. And so that's why you'll hear me intentionally changing my language so that way you think about it that way. But that talking about these things that they're seeing can be very helpful then to, there it goes, to getting them writing, to getting these journals started. So that way they're thinking about it when they get into the car to go to the doctor's appointment. They're thinking about these things that have changed, the fact that they don't want to go anywhere, the fact that being around crowds causes all their symptoms to be worse, that they can barely tolerate being around one or two people that they know very well, that people that they love, they can barely tolerate being around that. Memory issues. Fortunately, they've changed cars, so they're less toxic, but it's a danger because we now have starts where you don't take the keys out even. So there's not even a triggering event to turn the car off. And so a lot of people are walking away from their car with it running. Obviously, I don't think they should necessarily be driving, and there are ways to evaluate whether or not your clients are ready to drive, whether they have enough processing to be able to drive. And those resources are fantastic when you can find them. But that driving issue with the self-starting is, the button starting is a problem that I think it's making it worse for our clients. But there'll be other things. They forget about the dog. The grill's a common one because a lot of times, this is sorry for the men watching this, but a lot of times the ones who have the most difficulty getting help are the men. And showing, telling their vulnerability to somebody, a doctor, somebody who's a stranger. They're not even talking about with their spouse. So if you don't get them talking about it, then they're not going to be comfortable talking about it with somebody else. And the whole point is to get them talking to us so that way they'll talk to the next person that needs to help them. We're helping them in one way. We can't help them in all ways. And so they need more help beyond what we can provide. And so they go to doctors and, somebody will ask, so how you doing? Well, I'm doing fine. My knee's still a little sore. They're not talking about the elephant in the room because it requires either vulnerability or the possibility of medication, which a lot of people run away from, or, maybe, another worry is that it's in their head. It's other than literally being in the head, that it's a psychological issue. And so they don't want to get down that path because nobody's told them that they could have an injury to their brain that's more, it's going to stick with them longer. We don't want to say permanent yet. We want to say, well, these are problems that you might have to adjust to. They might be there the rest of your life. Well, we may be the first people they're hearing this from, but you have to start the conversation because otherwise their expectation is, well, if you can get me some money today or next week, I'd like to be done with this. And they don't realize that they may have something that's going to be there long term. And so therefore, they need to understand that there is more that has to be considered in trying to reach a resolution for them that isn't being reflected in the doctors that they're seeing right now. Some other examples, I've talked about the vision issues, the noise sensitivity, not being able to have more than one person speaking. They can't focus. And then sometimes they talk very softly because things may be very loud in their head. And so the sound is something that they're trying to avoid, the loudness, which also makes them more irritable, which also why they're withdrawing. And so that's another thing that they may notice and their loved ones may notice. And then there's the speech, which I've talked about, being slurred or speaking too slowly. So this is what I really want to talk about. It's just, you've got to change. We have to change how we interact with our clients. You have to give them more time to process information. Even though they may appear to be somebody, they've been in a role, a job where they've had responsibility, where people listen to them and they may have been the person that they could be relied on to answer questions or to know things, that all of a sudden they need more time. You have to anticipate that the brain injury survivor at this point needs more time because things aren't processing the way that everybody else has them processed. You have to limit how much you say to them at one time. I make, for instance, meetings with my brain injured clients. I make those shorter. You have to meet with them more often. You have to share less information, and you have to ask them. You have to check in with them frequently as to whether, one, they understand what you're talking about, but two, what's going on. Because if these clients, if your staff is not interacting with them on a regular basis, you're going to discover that their medical care just drops off. They aren't getting to appointments. They forget about appointments. They aren't listening to messages. They aren't writing things down. And so the staff has to you have to help them to understand what these injuries involve, what they look like. Those pamphlets that I talked about is just as helpful for the people that work around you and that are going to be interacting with the clients to read as they are for their family members. Their attention, you got to pay attention to their energy levels and to their how they're reacting to things, but the energy levels drop very quickly, and then it's going to take a long time to come back. Your clients will often tell you, these clients will often tell us that they get headaches right after they've interacted because they have to focus more, they have to concentrate more, they're trying to process information. And so then they're zapped. And when they're zapped for a while. And so you've got to pay attention to that, which means on the phone, you got to expect that they're, one, going to be more irritable. They can't see, so they don't have a double, they don't have a visual cue to go along with the auditory cue. And so maybe the sound of the phone gets them irritated. And then suddenly they just withdraw. They don't have anything more to say. They can't process information. It's important for staff to slow down when they're speaking to these clients on the phone. And then you have to expect they're going to be very afraid. The clients are afraid that this is permanent. They're afraid they're never going to work. They're afraid whether or not they're going to drive. They're afraid that their spouses or significant other is going to leave them. That is one of the biggest fears I see, that obviously, unless they're going to counseling to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that's not coming up. And their loved one doesn't know that this is one of their biggest fears because they're not voicing it. And so if you're not asking about it, then it's not getting asked about at all. So they're afraid. They have many things that they're afraid about, and that they have to be vulnerable in sharing. So they need us. They need to be able to trust us. They need to be able to confide in us. And then we need to get their permission. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second too, because I know it's one of the bullets that's coming up. They have uncertainty. They know, and if you don't think they know, then turn on the TV. They've heard about the football players who are ending up with a brain disease. They don't understand it. They don't know what CTE is, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, but they know that these football players are ending up with settlements because they are becoming abusive. They have domestic violence, or they have, or they commit suicide, or they early onset dementia. Our clients are aware that dementia and Alzheimer's are real possibilities. And so they don't know what the future is going to bring, and they're confused. They don't know why this has happened. They don't understand what's going on with them. They don't understand what's going on in their lives and with their cases. So I've already talked about who can you prove these things through. You've got the spouse, you've got significant others, you've got neighbors. Neighbors are an amazing source because they may have been the person who was out there helping their neighbors empty the gutters or plow their sidewalk in the winter, or do other things that maybe the neighbors saw that, oh yeah, they were the one always taking care of their shrubs, the shrubbery. They did all the hedge trimming. They loved using their leaf blower. And now they don't see them outside at all, and they see that when the lawn is mowed, it's somebody else mowing it. It's not them, and they don't see them come out of the house. And neighbors know, they observe a lot. They're of course are the close friends or the former coworkers, and you can have different people. I think sometimes we worry about getting the same witness, the before and after. But those can be different people, and oftentimes by having different people, you actually can draw out a better contrast, because you have people who talk about somebody who was person A, and then these other people are describing person B, and your medical person is the person in the middle, and maybe your biomechanic, and they're the people in the middle who explain why A and B exist, why A was the former person, but they're real. They were absolutely there. And then B is how it came about and why it is that this person is now person B and has to mourn for the loss of person A. You got the doctors, family doctors. I had one family doctor who was phenomenal. We talked about the change, the personality change in this person that he'd been treating for 12 years before this crash happens. And then he's got this different person. And he knew, this doctor, fortunately, knew what he was looking at. But the family doctors can give you with the personality changes, which are really helpful. PT and OT are very helpful. And there is cognitive therapy that goes under the occupational therapy, but the cognitive therapy can also be part of that, can be the driving testing to see if they're ready to return to driving, or whether driving needs to be taken away. And then there can be others, like your faith-based individuals who knew that this person always came to church, or they go to the faith, their priest or whoever they see in the church, or the other faith-based denomination and activities they might have engaged in, that they talk to about what's happened to them in their lives. So you might actually find somebody who's counseling before, counseling to them now rather, but not before you speak to the survivor. And that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind is your brain injured survivors are fearful, and they have no idea what's going on, and they have a very uncertain future, and they need to trust you. And part of that trust means that you need to let them know that this is who you want to talk to. And if you can follow up, whether they do and texting, or whether it's email, or whether it's in writing, but follow up and let them know that you're going to speak to so-and-so, or that you did speak to so-and-so. And that way, when they go to that appointment, they don't feel like you have violated that trust by speaking to that doctor, or speaking to that therapist, or speaking with their neighbors. They need to know this before you do it, because they already are so afraid of everything around them. And they have to be part of this process, more so than a lot of our other clients need to be. You have to talk to them. You have to get a type of permission from them as to why you need to do it, why it's important, how it's going to help them.
Absolutely. And Florence, is now a good time? I'll take 1 minute. We're going to take a
Yes.
quick break, and we're going to get back to this because there's a few more slides. And then I see some very good questions coming in too. So this is wonderful. But I'm going to bring in Kim with OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting real fast. And she's going to share with you guys all of the great work that they do over there as well. There's so many wonderful staff members. You guys probably have heard Ingrid speak several times on all of our nursing home abuse cases that we've done. But we are so excited because we have Kim back with us today. We've missed you, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of the great work that you guys do.
Thanks, Ginger. I miss seeing you all guys too, and we're so thankful always for this opportunity. To tell you a little bit about us, OnPoint's a legal nurse consulting and a full litigation support firm, and we've been helping attorneys now for close to 30 years on any cases involving illness and injury. I'm going to highlight our key areas that we can assist you with. So we all know how difficult it is to get the records you need, and we've learned the importance of getting all the records that you need. And we have a team of retrieval specialists who can do that for you. And we have nurses who will return them to you OCR'd. For a consulting program, perhaps you're getting bogged down with your complex cases. Maybe your paralegals could use some help. Our consulting nurses have a lot of experience helping attorneys. They make the complex information simple, and they do that through timelines and chronologies that include our unique case analysis, which outlines strengths and weaknesses, as well as identifies missing records, systems failures, and possible red flags. We can also identify the impact of pre-existing conditions and can differentiate between new versus aggravated injuries. Our nursing home and long-term care program assists with anything long-term care related, from simple thumbs up, thumbs down merit screens to specialized experts who are familiar with those standards of care. And our program coordinator, Ingrid, who's been on these webinars, is a clinical geriatric specialist with over 30 years in that industry. Our expert witness program provides experts in any specialty needed. They are well-rounded, fresh experts. They are all clinically active and located nationwide. And there's no risk to you for us to search for the right expert. For damages, we excel at quantifying damages with both our physician and nurse life care plans and our medical cost projections, which are a lower cost option. For non-economic damages, our pain and suffering really helps to tell the client's story. It quantifies what the client experiences. We've learned today about the many symptoms that they have. We pull that information out of the records for you to expand upon. So I know records are all electronic these days, but if this still feels familiar, our goals are to make sure you are not blindsided, to simplify the medicine and avoid surprises. We're accessible, we think easy to work with. You can email me directly. You can also submit information through the Contact Us tab on our website. Thanks, Ginger.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kim. And I saw a question that came in about asking about how much you guys charge for retrieving records. Would you say the best thing to do is just contact you and you guys can talk about that? Okay, perfect.
We provide all the information.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being with us. We've missed you so much. I hope that everybody will reach out to Kim, ask her any questions that you like, and she's going to put her information in the chat box in just a few moments.
Great. Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you so much, Kim. And then
I'm looking at the questions so that you know.
Yeah. Would you like to get to some of those questions, Florence, or should we?
Sure. No.
Okay.
So I saw that there's a question about mild TBIs and years after. This is the most common issue that I face as well. And so we get clients who, you know, they're getting close to 2 years and we're trying to piece things back together because they didn't get to a doctor sooner. And so as to the testing, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not neuropsych testing is more helpful than it is harmful. I think in some ways it can be very helpful when you have a zero starting point where you don't have anything to use to go off of. That being said, it has to be somebody that you trust, and you'd have to, you have to tread carefully, because there's a lot of the malingering if you haven't had neuropsych involvement before in neuropsychological testing. By the way, there's no such thing as a neuropsych. There's psychologists, and they're trained to do neurological neuropsychological testing. But that being said, there's this thing called malingering, which just means faking. And the defense loves to do all these tests to try and distort whether or not your client is faking something. And one of the things to keep in mind on this is if your client has been tested relatively recently with neuropsych testing, then they won't get retested because there is some guidelines within this industry that if you do it too soon after another one, it's invalid. So you are sort of protecting them by doing it if you know you're close to trial, but sometimes your doctors need it because they don't quite see it. I do try to avoid it because of that battle I've gotten in on whether or not our clients are exaggerating. And I don't want to, I try to avoid these sideshows. It's the same reason I don't use medical bills, because with a brain injury, unless they had brain surgery and they were hospitalized, your medical bills are going to be almost nothing, if not nothing. I mean, it's a battle. It's not worth getting into because the jury then doesn't see what the real injury is that they're there for, which is the thing that's invisible, but that you can tell through all these other witnesses. So as to a test, DTI, diffuse tensor imaging, is the latest methodology that's being used. It is getting admitted more and more, but it's not the diagnostic tool. It is after your doctor, your neurologist has made a differential diagnosis, then it's something that can help pinpoint where the damage is. So again, unless so Dr. Benson, I'm using in a case right now, unless he thinks it's something they need, then I'm not going to get that. But he'll do things like volumetric testing, and that tells you the size of the brain and how much it's shrunk, how much smaller it is than it should be for somebody their age and gender. And I think probably ethnicity and probably geographic region probably play some parts in these things. But he looks at that to try and figure out, have we seen the brain shrinking in ways that it shouldn't be at this age, that might show evidence of dementia or Alzheimer's or something else going on. And there are white matter tests, hyperdensity tests that they can run to see whether or not there's more spots in the brain where there's not activity, which is another sign of advanced brain injury. So the long and short answer to that is I prefer to use my treating doctor at that point. If I can get them into specialists that can sort of help show this is happening, that's helpful. But the lay witnesses can be the most helpful on top of whichever treating doctor I have, or expert if I have to. Then the lay witnesses are how I'm getting in the information of the before and after, which leads me, by the way, and so that answers that question. By the way, I did not know about the Case Western Brain Injury Fellowship. So that's good to know. I did have doctors that were at Case Western, but they were also working at Cleveland Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic was preventing them from testifying, but I will look more into that. I cannot answer about the perimenopausal women and with brain injury whose symptoms overlap. I can't answer on the refusing treatment. And that goes back to the fear. And I haven't tried this. What I've done is, and so what I haven't, let me finish that thought. I haven't tried the idea of using a psychologist who hasn't treated them to talk about, or the neurologist who can talk about the fear that is created because of going through this event and having these changes happen. Somebody who could look at the records and maybe interview or counsel with the spouse or significant other, family member, or some loved one, and then use that as a way to backdoor it in That may be one other way to try and do something where you have a client who refuses treatment. And because we know that there are other people telling us that these are problems, or you wouldn't be raising it, right? So the other one I'd say is there are experts in women's health who would be very helpful for somebody who is going through menopause or perimenopause and has a TBI at the same time, to talk about how that can exacerbate the symptoms and to change their ability to recover. And then I thought I saw one more. Oh, treaters or experts offer an opinion on TBI. Yes, I've gotten them to talk about dementia because they have training that, and they read journals, and they've been able to ascertain it from their own intellectual inquiries that having a brain injury increases their risk for dementia or Alzheimer's, and therefore also, on top of that, the fear that a person goes through affects their longevity, it affects their health, and that it's a real fear because it's a real risk. And that it's and I had a doctor recently offer an opinion that there's a greater than 50% chance likelihood, they believe, that this person is going to suffer from the long-term effects of a brain eating injury or dementia or Alzheimer's. So hopefully that answered that question. I always, by the way, I have to share my slide. I always, let's see, I got to get back to sharing. Hold on. Okay. I always have depositions separate. I want the loved ones not to have any interaction on what the other one says, because the injured person cannot afford to hear it, and then they cannot be honest with the other person in the room. And if you're going to get them to talk about the fact that they've had to, help them get off the toilet, help them clean up, or help them because they couldn't engage in sexual activity and they tried, then you can't have them present in the room, because if you're asking them to be vulnerable with you, with the defense attorney, with a stranger who's typing it all down, then you can't have their loved one in there, because that's not actually going to support them. There is, by the way, a DVD on trial guides. If you're a member of AHA, then you know about trial guides. You have to be a plaintiff-only attorney for it. But it's really helpful for the clients just to watch. It talks about what to expect. It just talks about the role the DME has, the defense medical exam has in the litigation, and the fact that you don't have a relationship with this doctor. This doctor isn't there to prove your case. This doctor's actually there for the other side, who's trying to, affect the value of the case, and that they can do under our system, right? So this DVD, it's only 30 minutes, which is the right amount of time for them to be able to watch it and not get stressed out. But I've also let them take it home and watch it home, and then they can have time, so that if they can only watch a little bit at a time. I give them a worksheet to fill out immediately after the appointment. They get ahead of time so they can understand what they're looking for and think about it. And then I make sure that somebody's driving them. And if they don't have somebody to drive them, then I hire somebody to drive them, because the last thing they need is to be stressed out when they get there, because driving already pulls on all their senses, or that they are too stressed out and exhausted afterward to drive safely home. So I find that that's really helpful. And I have them fill out that worksheet right away while they're thinking of it. The doctor saw me at 5:12. I was in there for 20 minutes, and I looked at my watch, and he only, examined me for like 5 minutes of that time, whatever it is. And that's helpful then when we get back to the time that they have to recall this exam, that they can testify about, yeah, I was only in there, and the doctor he didn't know me, he didn't ask questions like my doctor does. And that's where that can be helpful, because then they can refer back to it for their own recollection. It's just something they create for me and for them. And it's the same with a checklist. If you don't want it to go to the doctor, then it's created for you, and you just make it for you. And with the journals, it's the same thing. unless and until I decide I'd want to use it, or the client testifies that, which happens, testifies that, well, I was reading through my journal last night. Oh, you have a journal, do you? So I like to be aware of what's in it, because the clients have memory issues. So there's a good chance, even if you tell them this is just for our reference, that they're going to talk about it when they're getting their deposition taken or when they're being examined by the defense doctor. So just be prepared for it, and I don't worry about fighting that, because if the client looks at it because it helps them, then I don't have a fear over the fact that a jury might know what they say in there, because they're being truthful. They're doing it to try and help their recovery. It's not, it's so that they know remember what they want to talk to a doctor about, or they want to talk to their psychologist about. And I do encourage all my brain injured clients and survivors and their loved ones to do counseling. And I encourage them to do it with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And I'm very clear about that. I don't want them going to a counselor who doesn't really understand the medicine and doesn't understand brain injuries and doesn't have training behind it. I want them to go to somebody who has training and if they don't know a lot about brain injuries, we'll learn about it. And then the last thing, stories, I make sure that all the witnesses have a story that they can talk about. I've talked about providing the client's family with written resources, and I'm going to race through because I can see we're at the end of time. I give them time to process. We have to make sure that there's somebody that can listen to your client, your brain injured person, as well as to the loved ones who have to support them. Find out if they need help with daily things. I help because there may be something that would help them easily that they're not thinking of. It may be as simple as putting a calendar, a weekly calendar that they can dry erase on the front of the refrigerator, so that the person remembers what's going to go on that day or that week. You'd be surprised at sometimes the simple things that can make a big difference. And then help give them guidance. They need a time frame, because the doctors, a lot of them will say, well, 4 to 6 weeks. And we've heard this. We've heard it out of the defense experts. They say 6 weeks is what you need to recover. And we know that's not the truth. They need to hear it from us. They need to hear that, it might take you 6 months. And there may be some things that stick around for a year, and it could be 18 months. And I mean, in some cases, with some of my clients, they're still dealing with it 3 years later. And maybe you don't tell us all this at one time, but I find it is easier for them to hear it right away from me, is that there's a possibility that these injuries are permanent. If it's 3 years and you've got injuries, you can expect that you're looking at something now we need to help adjust to how to live with, as opposed to how to try and cure or make go away. And so they need to hear it from us. And you got to give them that range so that they don't get despondent if it's 6 months and they're still dealing with something and they thought they were going to be better. That they hear from somebody that they trust that it could be 3 years and it could be a lifetime, because you'll help them by being honest. If they heal before that, then that's great. That's icing on the cake, right? But if we aren't honest with them, then we're not doing them any favor. And then I try to go where they're comfortable. By the way, there's nothing better than going to their home. And you got to give them time, because they want to think about it. They don't want you showing up and not making sure they feel like their house is tidy, because you are somebody that they trust. You are somebody they respect and in some ways look up to. So they want a time to put on, to make sure their home is ready for you to come into it. But when you go into their home, for those of you who haven't, the reception you will get and the change that it causes in your relationship, you will be amazed by. And you will question why you weren't suggested to do it sooner. That's my opinion. And it just, you'll get such honesty from them that you don't get otherwise. These are other things to consider. And a big one are the facial changes in photos. You'd be surprised. I'm not going to go through everything on here because I can see it's 4:30. But these things, and Ginger has his slides for you, but these things that they used to do before and that are different now are obvious in their photos, their facial changes. It's obvious in their handwriting. It changes in a lot of my clients. And then their hobbies. They can talk about times where they did things that they enjoyed doing. Sometimes they talk about it in still a flat affect. They can't, they've lost that ability to connect with the things that used to make them joyful. But sometimes the clients can talk about it, but then they also can talk about the fact that they can't do it anymore. And you can see that change in them. And photos are very helpful for them to be able to talk about, oh, this is something I love doing. Because, by the way, one of the things we also know is it's helpful if they're not the complainer. We don't want them to be the one talking about how sad they are or despondent they are. They need to be the one who talks about what they're doing every day to try and get past this injury, or to accept this injury, embrace it, and accept the new them. That's what we want them to be able to talk to the jury about. And brightness in the eyes, it's another thing I've seen in photos. You'll be shocked when you start looking for these things in the photos, how they show up. And I think this is my last slide. There's the thing on the pink concussions. These are some other additional resources. They are hyperlinked, so they'll take you to them. But I can tell you, we know from statistics that brain injuries are affecting, and I just wrote this down from the CDC, it's the leading cause of death and disability in children and adults ages 1 to 44. There are 176 traumatic brain injury related deaths every day in the US. 176. It's all we can do to make sure that we are helping recognize it. We're helping our staff recognize it. We got to give them the resources to know the questions to ask, to know what to look for, so we can get in and help as early as possible, and also help support our staff, because dealing with the brain injured survivors can be some of the toughest work they do. And if once they understand that this person isn't just an ornery son of a gun, but actually this is their injury, and here's how they can interact to make it better, you'll do your clients a big service, and you'll help your staff so that they don't get frustrated with you and they don't get frustrated with the clients. That's all.
Perfect. I wanted to say thank you so much, Florence. You did an amazing job today. And can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, perfect. I also wanted to let you guys know, again, just give me a few moments. I will be sending around a copy of this wonderful recording of today's webinar. I want you to stay in touch with Florence. Here is actually a copy. I had her information right here. I'm hoping you guys can see this. Can everybody see that okay? I want you to stay in touch with Florence. Send her an email if you have any questions. I'll be sending you a copy of the slides, as well as a copy of the wonderful checklist that she had as well. And then please stay in touch with our amazing partners over at HMR, OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting, as well as Fox-AE, because they are incredible. Again, a great team to work with. I know we really enjoy it. But I want to thank everybody so much for participating and being such a great supporter of ours as well. And then also, I know Ted is not here today for the great coffee giveaway, but we do have a winner. And the winner of today's coffee giveaway of 4 bags of freshly roasted Ethiopia coffee is actually Mr. Mike Watson. So congratulations to Mike. Both Ted and I are going to reach out to you after this webinar, Mike. He's an incredible trialer, you guys, over in Atlanta, Georgia. I happen to know him, so I'm really excited that he won today. But Mike, congratulations, and I hope you're going to enjoy this coffee. We'll make sure that you get plenty of it and you can share it with anyone that you like. And I'm seeing all these amazing comments. Do you see these? Florence, in the chat box. They said you did an excellent presentation.
Oh,
This is
thank
great.
you.
You guys are so sweet. We have the best viewers. Also, you guys don't forget tomorrow and on Thursday, we have 2 more brand new webinars that you can watch. So go to connectionology.com, sign up. And then of course, I'll be launching all of our August webinars as well. But Florence, I hope you come back because this has been really good today.
Thank you very much. I'd be honored.
Yeah,
Really.
do you have any last questions or comments you'd like to make about today?
No, it's a little different not being able to see everybody, so that's its own challenge. But I do appreciate all those that nice feedback. I always will take any feedback and any suggestions and something you've done that you found really helpful. I'll take it because that's what I do. So to speak, I gobble it up. I will take as much information as I can to try and help our clients. That's why I'm only doing brain injury cases and death cases now, because they really need help, and I really want to help them.
Well, you're doing an amazing
By the
job.
way, one thing I want to add, as
Uh-huh.
lawyers, we need counseling too. And you know, we can support our staff by getting them counseling too, because dealing with the individuals who have suffered such losses and trying to help them overcome them is exhausting. It takes a lot out of you. It's why we have such a high level of, you know, our own issues with addictions within our profession and other problems that occur, because you can't take it all on. So if you haven't ever considered it, I'd consider making sure you talk to somebody at least once in a while, so that you check in with somebody who can just support you and listen to you, because you need that, and you need to do it for your staff too.
That is a great point, and I'm glad that you said that as well. And I'm smiling again, Florence, because Mike, the winner of our coffee giveaway, he just said, woohoo. He says, thanks for the coffee, just icing on the cake after Florence's presentation. I saw Florence in March here in Atlanta at the AAJ TBI seminar. So you're
Thank you
doing
very
great
much,
work.
Mike. And thank you, Melvin.
Keep
Thank
it
you,
up,
all of you.
Florence. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching us today. We will see you soon. Keep an eye out for my email. And again, thanks to all of our incredible partners with us today as well. Take care, guys. Bye.